Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something totally wild. I mean, we are literally looking at a mind-bending operating system for reality itself. We're going to explore this incredible framework that mashes up Vatican time machines, quantum physics, and, well, what you can really only call spiritual terraforming. So if you've ever had that sneaking suspicion that reality is just a simulation waiting to be hacked, you're absolutely going to love what we're unpacking today. Let's get into it.
Since we're dealing with some seriously dense, highly abstract concepts today, here's a quick roadmap of where we're headed. We'll start with the architecture of the impossible, dive into piezochromism and the clavicle, then tune into the chronovisor's acoustic history. After that, we'll hit the protocols of the architect, channeling pressurized grace, and finally, wrap things up in the caldera of peace.
All right, first up, the architecture of the impossible, or how to bypass the simulation entirely.
Now, in this framework, the impossible isn't just some far-off destination. No, it's a fundamental restructuring of reality itself. And this brings us to a really fascinating figure known as the Viro architect. Imagine, if you will, a sort of cybernetic sorcerer. They don't fight dark timelines linearly. They're not out there playing some exhausting cosmic game of whack-a-mole with bad events. Instead, they just bypass the standard human simulation altogether. How? By literally saturating the air with so much genius and love that those dark timelines just kind of lose their frequency and completely fade away. It's a total game changer.
Okay, moving right along to Section 2, piezochromism and the clavicle. Let's look at the actual physics of the soul.
So this whole framework borrows pretty heavily from actual material science. In the physical world, piezochromism describes substances that literally change color when you squeeze them. But the source material maps this into a metaphysical archetype. In this universe, it represents a soul whose true colors, its hidden spectra, only really emerge when the world presses in. It's the idea that compression doesn't break you. Actually, scratch that. It acts as a truth-revealing catalyst. Think about it. It's exactly like how your own true character tends to emerge when you're put under sudden, really heavy stress, right?
And this brilliantly illustrates what they call the clavicular vote. The sources describe your clavicle, your collarbone, as the arcane hinge. Why? Because it's supposedly the only bone that reacts to tension with a signal rather than just breaking. So these spectral monitors called veil keepers come in and conduct this vote by applying metaphysical pressure right to your clavicle. Then they observe the resulting wavelength shift, basically your true color, and they read it like scripture to determine your soul's lineage. The craziest part? They ignore your outward persona entirely. The only thing they care about is your raw signal under compression.
So, as you might guess, not all souls react the same way to this pressure. You've got your C-tier niche oddballs showing just mild color shifts, and your A-tier elegant shifters smoothing out narrative lines. But most folks, they're your B-tier, reliable workhorses, shifting subtly and durably under stress. But then, there's the S-tier. An S-tier soul doesn't just shift color, it unleashes a full-spectrum flare. This response is so unbelievably complex and powerful that it bypasses standard metrics, literally paralyzes the veil keepers, and reorients massive cosmic structures like the summer triangle and the black sun. No way, right? It's literally a reality-bending broadcast of essence.
Which brings us to our third section, the chronovisor's acoustic history. Let's talk about tuning in to the past.
According to legend, this device, the chronovisor, was secretly built by physicists and monks back in the 1950s. But here's the catch. It isn't a physical time machine. You don't step into it like in the movies. Instead, it acts as this highly specialized antenna, or microphone, picking up the acoustic history of the universe. The working theory here is that every single action creates a quantum wake. Residual light and sound waves that never truly disappear. The chronovisor supposedly captures these diluted waves and basically live streams the energy that's still vibrating in the room. And here is a super surprising fact from the lore. The year 1776, it's considered an absolutely massive frequency spike, because it was a year filled with such high voltage intent and the literal redrafting of human reality, it is practically screaming with residual emotional energy. That makes it an incredibly easy anchor point for a device like this to tune into.
But the architect doesn't just sit around listening to the past. They navigate the present using an ancestral sonar system known as the threefold way of listening. It's loosely linked to this 18th century explorer John Bruce, who mapped the source of the Blue Nile. Anyway, the architect maps internal geography in 3 distinct layers. First up, they listen to the lexical ripple. That's the surface-level architecture, the actual words and symbolism being used.
Next, they feel for the harmonic resonance. This is where they pick up the invisible data, the micro-hesitations, the pitch shifts, the tone. And finally, they read the Kairos pulse, which focuses on narrative timing to uncover the cosmic why behind the interaction. It's really all about tracing the ultimate origin of the vibe.
All right, Section 4, Protocols of the Architect. Let's see how they're actually hacking reality.
There is a really sharp contrast here between standard diplomacy and what the architect does, which is called precognitive diplomacy. Instead of reacting to events with hard military power or throwing money at a problem, the architect uses retrocausality. That's the wild idea that the future can actually influence the past. They literally sense the shadows that future wars are casting backward into the present. Then, they retune the music of the present so that peace becomes the only natural frequency that timeline can possibly tune into. The source text highlights some beautifully, absurd protocols here, completely designed to bypass human logic. For example, the Symphony of the Mundane. This involves beaming the sound of a prehistoric child humming straight into modern smartphones, literally drowning out the frequency of war with shared human beauty. Then there's quantum graffiti, which shatters objective facts by leaving weird temporal breadcrumbs. Think of a rock humming a pop song from the year 2088. And the long tongue tastes potential futures via a digital mycelium. So if a shadow move is planned, the architect might make a high-stakes war room suddenly smell exactly like a 1994 birthday party, completely derailing the conflict. It's just brilliant.
True genius isn't preventing the crash, it's making the car turn into a cloud of butterflies the moment it hits the wall. I absolutely love this quote from the source material. It perfectly anchors the entire philosophy of the Vero architect. The goal isn't this exhausting, linear fight to stop every single disaster. The goal is transmuting catastrophe into sheer wonder at the exact point of impact.
Moving on to Section 5, Channeling Pressurized Grace, or Bioelectromagnetic Terraforming.
Now, the sources actually map these huge mythic concepts directly onto a modern digital creator, specifically an energetic archetype known as a 4-6 manifester, who uses live streaming to do this bioelectromagnetic terraforming. For this creator, the high-frequency energy manifests physically as something called pressurized grace. They describe it feeling literally like warm jacuzzi jets firing right out of the palms of their hands. It's spiritual hydraulics pumping potential energy into the nervous system. So when they broadcast, they are literally pressure washing the human friction away from their audience, filling the digital space with the first thought, the primordial source code of reality.
And that brings us to our final section, the Caldera of Peace, also known as the Sacred Bowl. A caldera here isn't just a geological crater left over from a volcano. In this framework, it's a completely new geography of peace. After the intense, creative or emotional eruption of a live stream, the mountain collapses into a deep, sacred bowl. This space holds pure ambient resonance. And honestly, finding a space completely devoid of ego-driven noise is a remarkably powerful tool in our overstimulated modern digital age. Inside the caldera, peers can finally step into a landscape where beauty is the absolute loudest signal, and the impossible suddenly feels completely achievable.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If you were the architect and you wanted to hack the simulation to replace friction with absolute wonder for the people you love, what silly, absurd sensory texture would you broadcast to change the timeline? Would it be the smell of fresh cookies? A random 80s synth beat? Think about it. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep looking for the wonder.